In the summer of 1967, a single San Francisco neighborhood became the most famous square mile on Earth, then collapsed in less than 18 months. Over 100,000 people arrived in the Haight-Ashbury between June and August alone, transforming a quiet residential district into a global cultural flashpoint. Today, the physical places where that transformation happened are gone or unrecognizable, replaced by boutiques and tech money. What almost no one realizes is that the Summer of Love was never meant to happen at all. It was accidentally triggered by a single magazine article in March, published in the San Francisco Oracle, that invited the world to come witness something sacred. Using period photographs, police reports, and eyewitness testimonies, I can now reconstruct the exact streets, interiors, and faces of a world that burned out before it could be properly documented. The epicenter was a single storefront on Haight Street, marked by a hand-painted mandala visible from a block away. The Psychedelic Shop at 1535 Haight Street opened on January 3, 1966. Founded by two brothers, Ron and Jay Thalen, it was the first head shop in America, selling incense, rolling papers, and underground newspapers alongside books on Eastern philosophy. But it was never just a store. It functioned as a community center, a free speech zone, and a distribution point for information about concerts, protests, and poetry readings. Step inside for a moment. The walls were covered in Indian tapestries and posters for free concerts in Golden Gate Park. A small back room held meditation cushions and a bulletin board where people pinned requests for housing, ride shares, and lost friends. The smell was incense and old wood, faint and persistent even when the door was open to the street. On busy afternoons in early 1967, you could find Allen Ginsberg sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking to teenagers who had arrived the night before from Ohio or Texas. Thalen's had built the shop as a quiet refuge, a place where people could talk without the pressures of money or status. But by summer, the shop was overrun. Lines formed outside. Tourists snapped photos through the window. The intimacy was gone. On October 6, 1967, the brothers closed the Psychedelic Shop permanently and held a mock funeral in the Panhandle called the Death of Hippie. They were not shut down by police. They were not evicted. They chose to close. The hidden truth, recorded in Ron Thalen's later interviews, is that they believed the Summer of Love had destroyed the intimate community they were trying to build. Commercialization and media attention had turned their experiment into a spectacle, and they wanted no part of it. The store that symbolized the birth of the counterculture was deliberately ended by its own founders to protest what the movement had become. But the Psychedelic Shop was just a storefront. The real architecture of the Summer of Love was built in the places where people slept. At 710 Ashbury Street, a Victorian house with a deep front porch and peeling blue paint became the most famous crash pad in America. The Grateful Dead rented the house in late 1966 and lived there collectively until October 1968. The house functioned as an open crash pad. Anyone could sleep on the floors, and free food was distributed from the kitchen to whoever showed up. Picture this. The interior was dark during the day because curtains were usually drawn to keep out the sunlight and the stares of passers-by. The living room floor was covered in mattresses, sleeping bags, and people at all hours, some asleep, some awake, most somewhere in between. The kitchen table was always crowded, often with people the band had never met and would never see again. There was a piano against one wall. Jerry Garcia kept his guitar in a corner near the stairs, leaning against the banister. By August, the smell of unwashed bodies and rotting food had become permanent, seeping into the walls and the furniture. The house had been designed for a single family. By midsummer, it was housing 30 or 40 people on any given night. Neighbors filed over 40 complaints with the San Francisco Police Department. between March and September 1967, most of them about noise, crowds, and sanitation. On October 2nd, 1967, police raided the house and arrested several band members for marijuana possession. The raid was front-page news, and the house became a symbol of persecution, a martyr for the cause of freedom. But police reports, archived in San Francisco city records, show the raid was not primarily about drugs. It was a response to months of neighborhood pressure, to complaints about public urination, trash, and people sleeping on porches up and down the block. The house that symbolized freedom and openness was shut down by the very overflow of people it had invited in. The collapse of the crash pads drove people into the streets, and the streets became the stage. The Panhandle is a 7-block stretch of park connecting Golden Gate Park to the Haight-Ashbury, lined with eucalyptus trees and wide enough for a few pathways and open grass. It had always been a quiet neighborhood park, a place for dogs and children and Sunday afternoons. But starting in October 1966, it became the gathering place and free concert venue for the entire counterculture. The Diggers, a guerrilla street theater group, led by Emmett Grogan and Peter Coyote, began serving free food there every afternoon at 4. The food was donated, scavenged, or stolen. It was served from a large steel pot set up on the grass, no questions asked, no payment required. The Diggers' free food program was not idealistic charity. It was a calculated political act designed to collapse the money economy and force people to confront dependency and power. Grogan wrote in his memoir, Ringolevio, that he wanted to create a world where survival was not tied to work or money, where people had to trust strangers to eat. Free concerts were held nearly every weekend in spring and summer 1967, drawing thousands. Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, and the Grateful Dead all performed for free on makeshift stages, with no permits, no security, and no ticket sales. The San Francisco Chronicle covered the concerts with a mixture of fascination and alarm, running photos of barefoot crowds sprawled on the grass under headlines about lawlessness and disorder. The park that hosted the most famous free concerts in American history has no monument, no plaque, and no official recognition of what happened there. But by the fall of 1967, the Panhandle had become dangerous. The Diggers stopped serving food because they could no longer control the crowds or guarantee safety. The concerts ended because the city refused permits and the bands grew exhausted. The park filled with people who had nowhere else to go and nowhere else wanted them. On June 7, 1967, Dr. David Smith opened the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in a small storefront at 558 Clayton Street. He had been a young physician at the University of California, San Francisco, and he had watched the flood of untreated illness, malnutrition, and bad drug reactions overwhelm the emergency rooms. The clinic was staffed entirely by volunteers. There were no fees, no insurance forms, and no questions about legal status or identification. Close your eyes for a moment. The clinic was a single room with a waiting area that spilled onto the sidewalk because there was not enough space inside. The walls were bare except for hand-drawn posters about hygiene and safe sex, taped up with masking tape that curled at the edges. Patients sat on the floor because there were not enough chairs. There was one exam table behind a curtain made from a bedsheet. Dr. Smith and his volunteers worked 16-hour shifts, sometimes longer, sleeping in the back when they could. The line outside often stretched half a block. Most of the patients were under 21. By August, the clinic was treating over 250 patients per day, far more than it had been designed to handle. Patient logs archived at the University of California, San Francisco, show that the majority of cases in summer 1967 were not drug overdoses. They were basic infections, hunger, venereal disease, and untreated wounds. Many patients had not seen a doctor in years, if ever. The clinic's records are evidence that the Summer of Love was a public health collapse, disguised as a spiritual awakening. The only institution built to save the Summer of Love is the only one that outlived it. The Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic still exists today, relocated and expanded, serving thousands of patients each year. By October, the clinic was treating more people than had ever lived in the Haight before the summer began. The Haight-Ashbury today is a district of vintage clothing stores, gelato shops, and median. Home prices over $2 million. None of the buildings from 1967 carry markers of what happened inside them. There are no plaques, no tours, no official memory. The Summer of Love lasted 90 days, but the places that held it disappeared in less than 2 years. What we remember now is the myth. What we lost is the physical world where it actually happened. No amount of reconstruction can bring back the smell of incense, the sound of an acoustic guitar on a porch, or the face of a stranger who let you sleep on their floor. If there is another lost place you want me to reconstruct, let me know in the comments.